Hey everybody, hope you guys are having a good day, and welcome to another Dark Souls 3 video. Maybe it's just me, but I haven't heard a lot of people talk about how insanely overpowered bleed is in this game. And so today, I wanted to showcase just how crazy this bleed build can get by beating Dark Souls 3 by only using bleed weapons. So after creating our character, we wake up in the Cemetery of Ashes and our run begins. So we picked the Thief class because not only does it start with a dagger that causes bleed damage, but it also has the most amount of luck. And luck is not only important for item discovery rate, but it's also important because it changes how often you're able to proc a bleed, and it changes how much damage that bleed does. And after taking out this crystal lizard for a good amount of souls, it was time to take on Gundyr. And because Gundyr is pretty weak to bleed, we're able to bleed him pretty easily, and the bleed is already doing a decent amount of damage. We're soon able to get a stagger off on Gundyr, and only a few slashes later, he goes down. With Gundyr out of the way, we head over to Firelink Shrine where we pick up an Estus Shard and the Silver Serpent Ring, which will give me more souls per enemy I take out. And then we travel over to High Wall of Lothric. A few minutes of looting later, it was time to take on Vort of the Boreal Valley. And our damage wasn't looking great, but it wasn't too bad. A few minutes later, we get Vort down to phase 2. And even though our dagger wasn't doing a good amount of damage, the critical hit we get is really good. And soon, Vort falls to the Crimson King. And then we get transported over to the Undead settlement. While we're here, we talk to Yhorm, who will give us a few free levels back at Firelink Shrine. And then I pick up an Estus Shard, an Undead Bone Shard, and then I pick up the Reinforced Club and the Great Scythe. And before taking on the Cursed Rotted Greatwood, I help Sigurd take down this demon, and then I pick up Flynn's Ring, which increases my attack power when my equip load is low, and then the Calanthe Ring, which increases my stamina recovery rate. And then it was time to take on the Cursed Rotted Greatwood. I decided to stick with a dagger for this fight because with its really good critical damage and fast moveset, it made destroying the weak points on the tree very easy. And pretty soon it was time for phase 2. Now this fight is pretty easy, and it doesn't take too long for the Cursed Rotted Greatwood to go down. We then head back to Firelink Shrine where we get some levels into health, stamina, luck, and dexterity. We then head over to our boy Yhorm and we get some free levels. We then travel to the Road of Sacrifices, and there's a weapon here that I really want to get. Unfortunately though, it's going to take some farming, so I'll be back in a bit. It only took about 6 years of farming, but we finally get it. The Great Corvian Scythe, and this is the weapon that I'll be using for the majority of the early mid-game until I can find a weapon that's much more powerful and deals a lot more bleed damage. But until then, we head back over to Firelink Shrine where we level up our dexterity to 18, and then we get the Corvian Scythe up to +2, and then we enter Farron Keep. We soon grab the Dream Chaser's Ashes, which allows us to buy an infinite amount of Titanite shards, and then it was time to duke it out with this demon for some extra souls. And after taking out that demon, it was time to face the Abyss Watchers. And our damage was looking pretty decent. The fight gets pretty chaotic, but after backstabbing the Abyss Watcher, it was time for phase 2. Now I got really close at the end, but thankfully with one more swipe from my scythe, the Abyss Watchers go down on the first try. We immediately haul ass over to the Catacombs of Karthus. We grab the Karthus Milk Ring, which increases my dexterity, and then it was time to face High Lord Wolnir. And because the Corvian Scythe makes me bleed as well, I decided to switch over to the Reinforced Club because not only would it do more damage, but I also wouldn't have to worry about bleeding myself. And I don't know why, but High Lord Wolnir was really out for me this time, and he kept summoning his skeletons and he kept using his sword, but eventually he goes down. With Wolnir out of the way, we head back over to Firelink Shrine where we get our Corvian Scythe up to +4. And then after leveling up a bit, we head back over to the Catacombs of Karthus. We take out this demon for a good amount of souls, and then we head over to Smoldering Lake where we pick up our usual supply of large Titanite shards. After that, we take out the old Demon King for a good amount of souls, and then we make our way back to Firelink Shrine. While we're here, we get our scythe up to +5, and after getting a few levels into dexterity and health, we make our way back to the Crucifixion Woods to take on the Crystal Sage. And it only takes 3 hits for the Crystal Sage to bleed, which is pretty awesome. The damage we were doing to the Crystal Sage was absolutely insane, and it was super satisfying to see how strong the bleed was. And only about a minute later, the Crystal Sage goes down. Back at Firelink Shrine, we trade in the Crystal Sage's soul for the Crystal Sage's rapier, which increases our item discovery rate. We then make our way to the Cathedral of the Deep, picking up another Estus shard. And then I get really lucky here when one of these enemies drops arguably the best bleed weapon in the game, the Warden Twin Blades. After that incredible find, we pick up Lloyd's Sword Ring, which increases our damage when our health is full, and then it was time to face the Deacons of the Deep. Now we weren't doing as much damage as I would have liked, but it wasn't looking too bad either. Now during this fight, I did actually make myself bleed a few times, but in the end, the Deacons go down. We then make our way back to Firelink Shrine, where we get the Warden Twin Blades up to +4. And because I want to get these weapons to max level, that means I have to take on the Dancer a lot earlier than what I'm supposed to. But with our weapons to +4, we were doing a pretty solid amount of damage, and we were able to get a decent bleed off. And it doesn't take long for the Dancer to go down. We then make our way over to Lothric Castle, picking up the parts we need to get our swords up to max level. We then take a detour down to the Consumed King's Garden, where we face off against Osiris. Now Osiris does resist bleed pretty well, but the damage we were doing wasn't super great, but it wasn't the worst either. And the bleed we were able to proc was pretty solid. We're able to bleed Osiris again, and with that, we go into phase 2. During the fight, I take a moment to apply some Karthus Roge to my swords, which makes it do extra bleed damage. And we're soon able to stagger Osiris, and because he's staggered, the bleed we are able to proc does extra damage. And after one more bleed, Osiris goes down. And with Osiris out of the way, we make our way to the Untended Graves to face Champion Gundyr. And after a few minutes of some very satisfying parries, Champion Gundyr goes down. After the champion goes down, we head back over to Firelink Shrine where we get some levels into luck, dexterity, and health. But before we can head over to Irithyll Valley, there is one item that I want to pick up, so we make our way over to the Panel World of Ariandel. And while we're here, we pick up a Titanite slab, so now we have all the parts we need to get these dual swords up to max level. And then we make our way to the beautiful Irithyll Valley. While we're here, we pick up a blood gem, which once we infuse with our dual swords, it'll make these do extra bleed damage. Unfortunately though, to be able to infuse these swords with bleed, I'm gonna have to go pick up the profaned coal. And that coal is in Irithyll Dungeon. Oh boy. It takes us a few minutes, but we're finally able to pick up the profaned coal, and while I'm here, I might as well go take on Yhorm the Giant. However, before I go take him on, we head back over to Firelink Shrine where I infuse the blood gem with my Warden Twin Blades. Now with the infusion, these blades do a little less physical damage, but having 70 bleed damage on these is huge. And then it was time to take on Yhorm the Giant, and I decided to use the Storm Ruler. Look, I know I said I was only allowed to use bleed weapons with this run, but Yhorm is the exception. My run, my rules. And just like that, Yhorm the Giant falls. This is the one and only time that I will be using a weapon that does not deal bleed damage. After that, we head back to Irithyll Valley where it was time to take on Pontiff Sullivan. Woo! Man, that damage is looking good. Now Pontiff isn't super weak to bleed, but he's super weak to being parried, and a few parries and a few slashes later, Pontiff Sullivan goes down. After defeating Pontiff, we immediately haul ass over to Anor Londo, where after picking up another Estus shard, it was time to face Lothric. And the bleed does an insane amount of damage. And not too long after the fight begins, Lothric goes down. We head back over to Firelink Shrine, where we get some levels into health, endurance, and dexterity. And then we make our way back to the Dragon Barracks to face off against the Dragon Slayer armor. And our damage was looking pretty good, and soon we get the DSA down to phase 2. It actually looked like I was going to beat him on my first try, but unfortunately, tragedy struck. Anyway, after that embarrassing end to attempt 1, attempt 2 goes a lot better. And we soon slay the Dragon Slayer armor. We make a quick pit stop at Firelink Shrine to get our health and stamina up to level 30, and then we head into the Grand Archives. Making our way outside of the archives, we climb this tower to pick up the Hunter's Ring, which increases my dexterity by 5. And after collecting another Estus shard, it was time to face the Twin Princes. And that damage, especially the bleed, was really good. We're able to inflict another bleed on Lorien, and we soon stagger him, allowing us to get a critical attack in that does a lot of good damage. And a few seconds later, we get Lorien down to phase 2. And our damage was looking really good, and soon we're able to stagger Lorien again. And while Lothric is trying to resurrect Lorien, we hit him multiple times with our swords, causing not 1, but 2 bleeds, which is pretty awesome. And just like that, the Twin Princes go down. We head back over to Firelink Shrine where we sell all the souls that we collected on our journey. And after getting a few more levels into health, stamina, and dexterity, it was time for the Crimson King to take on his final challenge, the Soul of Cinder. It didn't take long for us to inflict the Soul of Cinder with the bleed, and the damage from the bleed was pretty good. And while the Soul of Cinder was healing, we were able to inflict him with another bleed, dealing an insanely good amount of damage. And a few quick strikes later, we get the Soul of Cinder down to phase 2. We're soon able to get the Soul of Cinder to stagger, and we proc another bleed, doing a really good amount of damage. As the Soul of Cinder slams another lightning bolt into the ground, we get an opening, and after a quick slash, the Soul of Cinder falls, concluding another challenge run of Dark Souls 3. And there you guys have it. I beat Dark Souls 3 by only using bleed weapons. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I personally really enjoyed making it, really enjoyed editing it, and overall, I think bleed is an insane build in Dark Souls 3. So again, hope you guys enjoyed this video. A part 2 to this video will be coming out at some point that will have both DLCs, but until then, thanks for watching. Have a good rest of your day, night, evening, afternoon, morning, whenever, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Thank you.